From swashbuckling swordplay to supernatural sorcery, Netflix is a trove of hidden fantasy treasures just waiting to be discovered. You may have seen the big titles on the streaming service like Pirates of the Caribbean or Stardust, but that's just the edge of the map as far as Netflix's fantasy selection is concerned. We're heading into uncharted lands to seek out the best Netflix fantasy films you should be watching. Legend of the Naga Pearls. Centuries after an ancient war between two races, one descendant of the losing race discovers a way to restore their former glory through mystical objects known as the Naga Pearls. That's the start of the action-packed adventure in Legend of the Naga Pearls, which sees a common street thief and his CGI animal sidekick caught in the middle of the battle to take possession of the mystical objects. Whoever ends up with them could change the fate of the world. If that all sounds convoluted and ridiculous, don't worry, it is. But it's also a ton of fun for anyone who enjoys martial arts fantasy in all its CG-heavy wire-fighting beauty. Cirque du Freak, the Vampire's Assistant. If we're all being honest with ourselves, Cirque du Freak, the Vampire's Assistant looks downright horrible. From that overblown name to a release poster that looks like a student film parody of Twilight, there is nothing about this movie that would entice you to hit play. But anyone who does give it a chance is in for a treat. With a diverse cast that includes John C. Reilly, Salma Hayek, Willem Dafoe, and Josh Hutcherson, The Vampire's Assistant is a bizarre mix of fantasy, horror, and comedy that offers one of the more original vampire movies of late.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I am so excited to be here in an anonymous small town which used to have character but is now just a bland suburb filled with chain stores and surrounded by slums.
After two friends sneak into a traveling freak show in their hometown, one of them becomes convinced that one of the performers is a real vampire. That fateful night leads to the two friends joining a secret vampire war. Even that description sounds terrible, but Vampire's Assistant pulls it off well enough to make for a unique viewing experience.
Here, fill that hole.
I can't do that. I'm all cramped up. My legs are still numb.
Can you feel this?
Ow!
Dragonheart Battle for the Heartfire. Somehow, like the slow creep of a respiratory infection, the 1996 fantasy adventure movie Dragonheart quietly became a franchise. Maybe it's because we live in a magical world, or maybe it's just because studios love them some sequels, but there are now 4 Dragonheart movies. They all follow the same basic premise. A dragon shares a heart with a human, and through their bond, they save a kingdom or something equally important. Fortunately, you don't need to catch up on any of the other sequels to understand what's happening in 2017's Dragonheart Battle for the Heartfire. The 2017 prequel to the original film sees a king pass away, leaving his dragon without a heart buddy. It turns out that the king had 2 estranged grandchildren, though, who go to war with each other over the throne. Add in Patrick Stewart as the voice behind the dragon, and you'll be surprised just how much fun you have with it.
Friends, I like the sound of that.
Mojin, the Lost Legend. Equal parts archaeological adventure and supernatural epic, Mojin, the Lost Legend follows 3 grave robbers who are hired by a shadowy cult leader to search for the tomb of an ancient princess. To reach the tomb, they'll have to use their wits to make it through a series of increasingly dangerous challenges. You won't find many critics praising Mojin, the Lost Legend, but don't let that steer you away. While the plot may be bare bones and the characters fairly one-dimensional, there's a lot of fun to be had in these underground catacombs as wave after wave of supernatural terror descends on our protagonists. If you get a kick out of archaeologists kung fu fighting undead demons, you're bound to have a good time with this movie. Solomon Kane. The story of a bloodthirsty pirate who turns to a life of peace after the devil tries to claim his soul, Solomon Kane is a rare combination of action, supernatural thrills, and fantasy that doesn't get too bogged down in the spectacle.
You could tell your master that I am not yet ready for hell.
Kane fights hellspawn demons and regular bad guys in equal measure, but grounds the action with quieter glimpses into his own struggle to change his ways. Critics found plenty to like about the movie, even if audiences barely gave it a second glance. The Monkey King 2. While the first Monkey King is enjoyable, the sequel is where the story really comes to life, following the simian deity as he protects a traveling monk from supernatural threats. Don't get us wrong, everything about these movies is cheesy, but The Monkey King 2 loads that cheesiness with better visuals, better pacing, and a better overall story than its predecessor, making it a must-watch for anyone looking for pure, unrestrained fantasy adventure. And true to form for these kinds of Chinese productions, the climactic battle is a visual jumble of ridiculous CGI that alone makes this movie worth the price of admission. And since that admission price is $0 to begin with, what do you have to lose? Psychokinesis. In just a few short years, director Yeon Sang-ho's Train to Busan has become a modern zombie classic. With that kind of pedigree, you'd think that his 2018 fantasy superhero mashup Psychokinesis would have made more waves, but sadly, it slipped under the current for most people. When a despondent security guard unknowingly drinks water tainted by some sort of mystical meteor juice, he suddenly gains the power to move things around with his mind. With his newfound abilities, he sets out to reconnect with his estranged daughter. While it takes a while to get going, Psychokinesis rewards viewers with an epic finale that makes the whole journey worthwhile, and proves again that Yeon is as skilled behind the camera as he is at writing heartfelt, emotional stories. Vanishing Time, A Boy Who Returned. For a twisted, mind-bending fantasy experience, look no further than Vanishing Time, A Boy Who Returned. This South Korean film opens with 5 children who stumble on a mysterious cave deep in the forest, where they find a magical egg at the bottom of a lake. According to local legend, the egg holds a monster that can devour time. When the kids decide to break open the egg, they unleash an unexpected supernatural force that changes each and every one of them. While the central premise of Vanishing Time has its basis in fantasy, the story that plays out afterward is a remarkably gripping drama about friendship, trust, and betrayal. It's a quieter, more brutal take on the fantasy genre, but it's just as gripping as any action-packed spectacle you're likely to find on Netflix. Give it a chance and you won't be disappointed. The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. The story of a traveling troupe of performers led by a man who's made a bet with the devil to see who can collect the most souls, The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus is a unique fantasy adventure that most mainstream audiences missed in 2009. Imaginarium straddles a thin line between magical surrealism and over-the-top goofiness, but to its credit, it never goes too far in either direction. Heath Ledger does a lot to keep the film grounded, even as it goes deeper and deeper into dreamlike territory. If you missed Imaginarium when it was first released, you should definitely give it a shot now that it's on Netflix.